Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Independent Artist Podcast. Thanks for tuning in this week. Thought I'd start off today with a little check-in. How's everyone doing out there? Yeah, doing okay? We're leading up here to summer. Some of these are the big shows that we've been working for our entire year. We hope you have the work you're ready to show and you're really excited about it. And it's a little bit of a time crunch for a lot of us. So this week, Will and I have something kind of special planned. We thought that occasionally we would introduce back into the podcast some of the shows from early on that kind of have resonated with us and have stuck with us. And so one of our favorite episodes was that very first season with Clifton Henri. His talk is about sharing your authentic voice. How do you find that voice? And how do you create your body of work, not just looking around at the show, what's walking away and into people's homes, not chasing the product of the art we're trying to sell, but really, how do we get to the heart of what our authentic voice is? So it's a really great talk. Also keep in mind that this conversation happened in like June of 2021. What was going on then? Nothing was going on. The shows were about to open up and we all were experiencing a lot of new things and had kind of redeveloped our intentions towards our art practices. So as you're listening to this conversation with Clifton, keep in mind that there were things like Black Lives Matter going on at the time and the hamster wheel. We had all come to the conclusion that we liked that downtime even when we didn't expect that we would. And it's also a timely episode because Clifton was the poster artist for the Old Town Art Fair last weekend. He has launched a new body of work that has been so well received and getting critical acclaim. So I think this is a great time to shine another spotlight on Clifton. I hope you enjoy this talk with Will and Cliff.
I think of you as a Chicago artist. Is that where you came from? Is that where you grew up?
Yeah, Chicago's home, born and raised. I dipped out a little bit for, college and grad school, but then, brought my tail back on home. So yeah, nice. Chicago born and bred.
We had gone to dinner at some point. I thought you had like a Louisiana connection at some point. Is that where, do you have family down there or did I misunderstand that?
No. So definitely a New Orleans connection. One, because I just freaking love the place. You know what I'm saying? But my college roommate and a handful of guys I went to college with were all from New Orleans.
Okay.
To even backtrack a little bit, I went to a majority white school. And at the height of it, there may have been 10 or 12 Black folks at the school.
You mean in Iowa, actually?
In Iowa, yeah. In Dubuque, Iowa. Yeah.
Right.
So out of the, let's say 12, let's say 6 of them were guys, and 4 of them were from New Orleans. One of them ended up being my roommate and my best friend. So, Christmases and holidays and things like that would always take me to New Orleans. And nice. Over the years, since 2001, just kind of fell in love with the place and adopted it as a second home.
Yeah, it's an amazing city.
Sure.
What are some of your favorite spots down there? Where does your friend still live down there?
Yeah, they still live down there.
Okay.
Jeez Louise, what isn't a favorite spot?
Right. Yeah. I've seen you down there. You've got a whole crew when you've been showing at Jazz Fest. I've seen you booth down at Jazz Fest.
That helps too. That's part of why I love in New Orleans so much and why I'm down there so much is like Jazz Fest has now become a regular part of the schedule over the years. You know what I mean? And people know me and recognize me from my time in New Orleans, which is pretty cool.
That's really cool. My wife, Susan, but she's done Jazz Fest a few years in a row, and it's always amazing to me how who you see, not just on stage, but who comes into your booth. and sees your work or buys your work. I ran into Bill Murray in a beer line.
That's cool.
I couldn't freaking believe it. I was in the beer line, and I hear the voice, and you recognize his voice, and I look, and I'm trying to be all sly, and I pick up I'm like, that's Bill Murray, and I hear him just talking. So I just do a selfie, and I pick it up and just hold it up in front of my face, and he leans into the frame and he whispers in my ear, "You owe me $1."
You sound like him too. It sounds like him too.
Who have you run into at Jazz Fest? I'm sure you've run into people coming into your booth or just in the city.
I have Wendell Pierce.
I mean, that's a huge New Orleans guy.
Yeah. Like when he came in the booth, my boy Mac, he just leaned over into my ear and he was like, "She," you know what I mean? Like that's the line. That's the line we always hear him.
Right. From The Wire.
Line.
He's amazing.
Who else have I seen? Angela Bassett has been in my booth.
Amazing.
I didn't know who she was at first. Had this big super floppy hat, so you can't really see who it is. And then I'm like, oh shit, it's Angela Bassett.
Right. I big leagued Steve Miller at that show too. He was kind of just talking. I was doing jewelry in the booth and helping Susan sell jewels, and he came in and he kind of had the embroidered jeans look, and had like the fancy shirt, but it's kind of like, I'm not going to lie, he was a little douchey. He kind of had a douchey look, but kind of douchey with money. And I kind of big leagued him to go see Beck because Beck was playing. And I'm like, I want to go see that. And I was like, well, I'll talk to you later. And he kind of looked like somebody, but I saw him on the Jazz Fest post later that he was like, I'm like, oh yeah, that was Steve Miller.
There was him confirmation.
Yeah, just not just a regular douchebag, but a famous one.
Right. That's hilarious.
Yeah, sorry. So who else? I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Those are probably
That's huge.
Two of the more famous. Yeah, that's all I can think of. Like at the moment, those are the top two.
Of course.
Yeah.
Hey, how did you? I read in your bio, and I found this really interesting because I started the same way, but you were an art director at a small publication after school. And how did that start? Like, was this right after school that you got a job?
So I went right after undergrad. Undergrad was a mass communications degree. Right after that was I went to Savannah College of Art and Design for graphic design. And I was already doing photography along the way on my own, just, figuring it out. And I figured I was getting good in my own pace, but let me learn something that I know there's actually a job I can go to, or at least be a one-man shop. So let me learn the graphic design piece. I'm already doing the photography piece. So yeah, right after grad school, I completed the program. I stuck around in town for like 2 years.
In Savannah?
In Savannah, yeah. And then I had a friend who hooked me up with the, art director gig at a small little boutique agency in Chicago. So that brought me, it was a good reason to bring me home. It wasn't a ton of money, but it got me, but it got me into the arena. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, and this is what made me, and I'm sure you too. Like you were thinking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like graphic design, you're already a photographer, and what makes you more marketable. And me too was like I learned graphic design, and then I have my concentration is in illustration, so that's how I was trained. And it's like, well, how can I get this guy? His photos are for free. I hire the graphic designer; he's already skilled, and on the side you can get those photos. Yep. So I was always doing spot illustration and putting those into the paper. And I mean, that's how they get you. But it does get you a job. That's how you start out.
It gets you in there, and then it's a little bit easier to maneuver once you're in and you've been working for somebody for a year or two or whatever. Then it's like, now you have the insider scoop on, such and such agency is hiring, or this publication is hiring.
Right.
And it gave me an opportunity to freelance a little bit too, and to charge my agency an additional fee.
See, you're smarter about it then.
From my salary.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was just like, okay, well, you do it. like, well, we need a little illustration here. I'm like, well, I've seen your pen and inks. You do it.
Right.
At least you were charging more. So.
Yeah, I was saying, no, like we have a budget for photography, right? All right, cool. Well, on my lunch break or on Saturday, I'll go shoot X, Y, and Z, and I'll submit my invoice. Or if something needed to be printed, and I could get a better deal because I used to be a quote unquote print broker when I was in grad school. That's how I made a little bit of extra money. Somebody needed some design work, and then I would quote them, retail, what it would cost to get printed, work out a deal with the printer. So I'll get, another 20% or something on top with the printing. So I was a lot of times able to get them a better deal. So I'm like, oh, you need that printed? They charge what? I can do it for less. And then I would bill them out, the additional thing. But that all happened with going to school for graphic design, and having relationships with, printers and photographers, and then being in an agency and knowing that they have those line items for printing, for photography, for whatever. I'm like, I want all those line items.
Yeah. Just put Clifton right in there. Every line. Yeah.
Exactly.
Me. That's me too. Okay. That's me. Yeah. So who got you into this? I mean, how did you start? Is that Savannah again or?
No, actually. So I made a little bit of bread, and I'll share the numbers or whatever. It might have been like $38K or $40K, which is what the job that brought me to Chicago, right?
Right.
2005 or so. I went to an art festival. I'm looking around. I'm not terribly impressed with what I see. Like nothing's like really moving. Yeah. Specifically in the photography department. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
do you remember what show it was?
Yeah, it was Well Street.
Okay. Yeah.
It was Well Street Arts Festival. You know how they have LeBron's The Decision? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I saw The Transaction. I saw a guy with some mediocre artwork, and
did you see a little travel porn?
right. Mediocre artwork. I was like, I think I'm better than this guy, or at least I could be here in this arena. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then I saw a woman that was very excited exchange this guy cash for his work, and I saw The Transaction. Yeah. And I'm literally outside of the booth, and I got my hands on my hips, and I'm watching, and I'm like, there is no way I can't be out here doing the exact same thing.
That's amazing. So you just kind of saw it and started on your own.
Because what I was doing before, which is a terrible hustle, like people will have a event, like, oh yeah, I'm having a little cocktail social, and I'm selling tables. So if you want to rent a little $50 table to show off your work and try to sell some work and things like that. So I would do those on the weekends.
Okay.
And they were not lucrative, like by any stretch. Like these people have 20 family members come by, hang out. Oh, this is nice. Good luck. Congratulations. And then keep it.
I love the congratulations.
Right. And they keep it moving. So yeah, I just saw the opportunity there, and I'm like, no, people are coming here to purchase art. It has to be working for at least half the people here. There are 300 artists here. Yeah. So, why not?
There you go. How'd you go about the booth? Like, did you start looking at how they're setting up and where they're getting tents?
So I wasn't even getting that far, honestly. I would start talking to some of the artists, and we get the same thing now. Like people asking me, how do you get started? And then blah, 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 blah. And you think you might have a sell. And then they're like, yeah, because I'm an artist too. And I want to, and then it kind of just, you're there to sell. Right. And then they want to talk about how you got in the business. They want coaching while you're trying to sell. It's kind of like the wrong place to do it. So I was getting a lot of, like push-offs and people not necessarily sharing information on how to get into the show and X, Y, and Z. And as you know, it's not I saw a show today, I can go do a show next week or next month. It's like a 6 month to 7, 8 month
it's
process.
out,
Yeah. So they want their money up front. And, you have to apply the whole next year. You know what I mean? It's like the show's in August. It's like, yeah, if you want to do this show, yeah, you have to apply, next February.
Right.
So it took me a whole year to kind of get myself together.
And then once you get in, you're like, oh shit, I'm in. And you have, you kind of need that 6 months, and
Sure.
then it comes, and then you got to get your stuff together. You have to have your body of work. And because I remember that Coconut Grove was my first with this body of work, because I had a previous body of work. But with this body of work, I'm like, okay, Coconut Grove, I got in. And that was 10 years ago. So Coconut Grove was still the
primo,
Grove.
like a primo show. Yeah.
Really good. So I'm like, okay, I'm psyched. I got into a real one. I got Fort Worth right after that. And then I'm like, okay, I've got a body of work.
Yep.
Now I got to make it. Now I got to sell it. I already knew how to display it at the time. So I was a little bit ahead of where you were going, but that's amazing. And I'm almost surprised. Like I've talked to 3 people now who were like, Michael Cole, he helped me out. Michael Cole is like, he's the guy. He's like such a sweetheart. So when people are coming into he's super encouraging with up and comers, and he's such a gentle guy, a real gentle soul. He's like, oh, well, he kind of makes you feel like you can do it. So talking to Ty, and he totally encouraged my wife, getting her out there too. But Cole is one of those guys that, like, if you see Cole and you see Chicken Matt, you got to know it's like, okay, it's one of us. Like, do you ever size them up a little bit? And we're like, one of us is going to win the photography, but who's it going to be? I was wondering about that, because I kind of feel like, those guys, if they're in the shows and the top shows, those are, depending on what the jurors are looking for, it's like those are the photographers. And there are plenty of others. I don't mean to belittle others. Those are the guys I know as far as photography goes, but I don't want to put my foot too far in my mouth, even though that is kind of my job.
When I first started, there were the regulars, you know what I mean? Like, there were the guys who were like, if they were in the show, that's who was winning. You know what I mean? Like, that's who was winning the award. And I see it shifting. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, little by little, year over year. Like, I've definitely had my seasons, you know what I'm saying, where I'm like on a run, like every show or every other show. Like, I'm
the award tour.
Exactly. Yeah.
Susie and I were joking. We were sitting on the couch the other night, and I'm like, God, I wonder, this is probably like 6 months ago, but I'm like, I feel like I just want to send Cliff a ribbon. Like, he hasn't gotten one. He hasn't gotten a ribbon in 6 months. And like, I feel like he needs some kind of award to keep it going.
That is funny. Yeah, that would help, actually.
just to make you feel a little better.
That would have helped. I gave a whole thank you speech on Instagram or something, like, hey, I don't know what I did to deserve this, but
it just says best in Cliff, and it's a big long,
That's all good.
Hang tight. We'll be right back.
This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
So I've started using the events list feature in Zap to search up some different shows to fill those holes in my schedule.
I feel like I should have something to say, but I wasn't really listening to you because I'm looking at the events list right now, and it's pretty cool.
Okay,
so you drop the menu down, and there at the bottom, go scrolling all the way, about third thing down in the smaller print, it just says events list.
That's right. All of the shows appear here regardless of their application deadline. So you can use the filtering and the sorting to narrow down your search so that you can find that right show that fills your desired time frame or location.
I know a lot of people love that calendar. I like seeing the list of events. I like scrolling through and doom scrolling late at night. It's like online dating. They don't let you swipe left or right, but you can figure out who you want to date in the coming up year.
There's so much mediocre photography out there. I feel like with your work, you can't find the place. Like, you look in and you see somebody's like, okay, I've seen this barber chair and the ceiling has caved in, and there's graffiti all over the walls, and the light is shining on it, and it's a gorgeous photograph. But if you know where that room is, you can take the shot. But with your work, it's part of your experience. It's part of your story. You're saying something. You're not going to go find some autumnal leaves in a puddle and shoot that.
Right.
This is, you're saying something,
Right,
which is
sure.
really rare in photography. So, I mean, talk on that a little bit about how you find your voice.
So finding your voice through photography, really it's my perspective, what I would like to see represented out there. So a lot of my work is Black and brown faces. So portraits of, people, Black and brown, of African descent or Latino descent. Like that's what I'm interested in seeing. That's what I didn't see going to, museums and galleries and things like that growing up. I wanted to see a reflection of me and the communities that I grew up in and the people that I know and that I'm friends with and things like that. So I was like, all right, instead of just bitching about it, let me be one of the guys that actually like creates that kind of work.
Yeah.
Over time, I got encouragement because I found that other people were interested in seeing what I wanted to see and applauded me because they got what they wanted out of the work that I was naturally producing. So that's kind of where the voice comes from.
Well, there's a lot of strength in that too.
Yeah.
A lot of your imagery is about pride and it's about an individuality that has strength to it too. I'm thinking of a couple of your images.
You just have to believe in what your mission is or what your narrative is going to be. Let the narrative be the core that drives the work that you produce. Kind of what I've noticed in talking to like gallery owners and museum curators and things like that, and just my own opinion, a lot of the work in the art world that is celebrated is more so celebrated on what the artist was trying to do rather than what they actually did. And
interesting,
which means to me that the mission or your calling or your message or your intent is more important and more significant than the actual like final product, So it's almost like, I don't care how much money you have. I don't care how many accolades you have and blah, 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 blah. It's like, what do you stand for? You tell people what you stand for. And it's like, cool, I can get behind that. Let me know when you have something going on and I'll support, I'll blah, 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 blah. So it has more to do with
your heart
in the work and being able to convey that to people and then people understanding it. Like, I think that's where the rubber meets the road. It's a successful piece if you can convey what you want to convey and people receive it within the realm of what you were trying to say. And then that's a dope piece. That's what helped out in graphic design too.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I wanted to bring up one of your pieces. It's one of my favorites. There's a young man standing on top of a wheel.
Yeah.
And it's an incredibly strong image. It was chosen by Bayou City as one of the poster image.
It was a poster, yeah.
Kinda, they chose half of it.
Kinda.
They chose half. But I mean, you are an art director too. They needed a horizontal image. They liked that image, but they took half of it. And I don't want to, they did made you poster artist. They put you in the front, but that doesn't say what that photo says.
For sure.
If you take away the wheel.
Yeah, for sure. That one is so that one was shot in Ghana, and the name of the piece is The High Road. A lot of my work revolves around the idea of perspective, a change of perspective. The reason I shoot what I shoot is to kind of change the narrative of the imagery we see of Black and brown people, so it's more of a positive, more uplifting, more of your everyday beautiful nuggets of life and not just like tragic scenarios that we, are kind of used to seeing like within the media.
Right.
But yeah, that was a powerful piece. They wanted wings, they wanted.
Okay. I was going to ask you about wings next.
Yeah, they wanted to use wings, and I'm saving her. I don't know what I'm saving her for, but for the publicity of an event and a festival or something, and I'm not getting and end on it.
Yeah.
With that being my most popular, famous, recognizable piece, something's just like, nah, don't do it, because the next guy will be like, oh, you used it for that one, and you used it for that one, and they used it too.
Yeah.
They're like, nah, okay, well, what else you got?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I know exactly what you mean.
Yep.
You posted wings, and you got. There's a little girl that she's standing in her mirror, and she's standing on the sink,
Yep, with the arms
and she's got her arms raised, and it's such a powerful image of strength and of pride in young girls and pride in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You shared that on Instagram, and it went viral. I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, because I mean, everybody's kind of fantasy girl kind of picked up on that too. So anyway, talk on that a little bit.
All right. So there's a show in Miami during Art Basel, during Miami Art Week, called Prism. And I had a couple of pieces selected to be in the show. So Wings was one of the pieces that was selected in the show. So during that week, I ended up posting Wings. And because, all kinds of celebrities and everybody is out that weekend, like, I'm kind of pushing it a little hard. Like, yo, come to the show, come see the piece.
Yeah.
I'm looking for my break, right?
Yeah, of course.
And, a handful of important people end up coming by the show, end up seeing the piece. They ended up, photographing it, finding a copy of it or whatever, tweeting it, sending it out. But the big swing came when Alicia Keys posted the photo. Yeah, it went simply bananas after that. Yeah, simply bananas.
It didn't even, I remember seeing her post that, or you retweeted that,
yep.
Posted it on Instagram, and it didn't. Holly Berry commented on that too, or am I making that
commented
up?
On it. No. She was on there. She was on there for sure.
Okay,
I had to screenshot that too.
Yeah, of course. Alicia Keys posts it, and Holly Berry comments on it.
Yep.
I just remember seeing something like, "Girl, that's amazing." Yep. I'm like, blow.
Exactly.
How did that help you out as far? Did you get a lot more followers? Did it translate into money?
So followers, yes. Inquiries or whatever about the piece, yes. Did it turn over into dollars like the next day or the next couple days or things like that? Not immediately. I have sold, send a larger limited edition piece a couple occasions.
Yeah. That to me is
due to that, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
did it make money?
It resonates so much.
For sure.
I'm sure it did.
And it's a timeless piece, I think, and it's always going to be relevant,
Of course. And I loved what you did with the Kamala Harris image too.
That was cool. Too. I was on the fence. I was totally on the fence about it. But I'm like, it's cool when you can. I don't want to call it a bootleg, but you know what I mean. But when you can revamp your own piece where there is like some significance like in the world right now. So let's call it a remix, not anything else.
Well, there was so much excitement when that happened.
For sure.
And there's so much pride in that, and in pride in our country and for what has been accomplished.
Absolutely.
The walls that are breaking down. So, you can't fault anybody for getting caught up in that kind of excitement. And I loved that image. For
sure. The thing that made me do it, I'm like, let me remix it before somebody else does or somebody else tries to do a version of it. Because you would start seeing things floating around that, that was happening. So, but I'm glad I did it. She has seen it.
Has she really?
She has.
How do you know? How did you find out?
A woman that purchased like maybe 5 of them. I only did a small amount of them. Is good friends with her.
Incredible.
Yeah. So I think one is going her way, which is cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Super cool. Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. That image just resonates with so many people. That's why I wanted to ask you about it.
Yep.
And you've juried a lot of the top shows in the country. Because I've seen you winning best of show. So a lot of times they'll come in and they'll invite you to jury later. I have an ex-girlfriend that juried one of the really big ones, and she messaged me about it. She was like, I was prepared for the good. I was prepared for the bad, but I was not prepared for the sheer volume of middle of the road. Like, what do you do with it? So how do you do that? Like when you're jurying a show, I talked to our mutual friend, Michael Schwegman, about this. And he was talking about Money Mike. We call him the huge because he was like, you were like, well, you look at the awards. That might be your new name too, because it's kind of like you look at the awards and we're like, well, who won? The huge. We're like, the huge. There he is up at the top. But he was like, well, you just have to have, okay, here's my goods, here's my bads, here's my maybes, but you can cut it down pretty quickly. How hard is that? Do you get people asking you, like when you see, like when I see my friends on the jury, I get real quiet. I'm like, oh shit, what if they don't? Here's the honesty. What if they actually don't like my work? But do people reach out, or how does that work out for you?
So I don't think I've really had anybody reach out necessarily.
Good.
But
that's embarrassing.
A little bit. I've had to save a couple people in the show though. Before, like people who I thought should be in the show, and then somehow naturally didn't make it, and I'm like, wait a minute. That's when you get to throw your veto card in. So it's a little rough, right? So you're quote unquote, you're an elite artist in this arena. Like you've won an award. They've asked you to be a juror. You have confidence in your work. Your bar for your medium may have a lot to do with where you're at as an artist and what you produce, right?
Right.
So you have a bar, and if I'm the high bar, okay. So then you start looking at all of the submissions, and when people aren't producing work like either to your level or above your level, it's tough to judge. And each show has its own identity. Each show has their own,
Do they dictate that to you? Do they tell you what they're looking for at all, or do they just choose you and trust your vision?
They just trust us and the vision.
Good.
Like we actually curate the show. It's not, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. So make sure you put X, Y, and Z in the show, Right. Like I personally have a responsibility being a minority in the arena, in the festival circuit, to make the show as diverse as possible. So that's one of the things that I look at as I'm jurying.
How do you, in an industry like this that relies so heavily on the blind jury, how do you make it more inclusive? Because it is a really middle-aged white industry for a lot of what you're dealing with. You go to a show and it's like, well, I'm 50, and I know I'm like, and a lot of people still consider me one of the younger ones, and I'm like, that's crazy to me. But I mean, it is. How do you do that? How do you make it more? Is it just what people are saying?
Honestly, you have to. It all comes down to the submissions. You can only pick from what's in the pool.
Right.
So while looking, I guess I just kind of keep that in mind, looking for diverse themes in the work.
The imagery and
in addition to
some of the people that are out there too, who are like, okay, well, I know this guy's artist and I want that to represent the show too. It's not like you're just picking black voices or brown voices. You're saying like, okay, well, this guy's a pro. This guy's saying something interesting.
There has to be a quality level, of course, a quality level too. Both on presentation and what you're exhibiting.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough to jury some of these shows, man. Sometimes you don't have a lot to work with, especially if you're considered the expert for your medium. Sometimes people will be in the jury like, yeah, so I don't know how to jury this. What's your take? So now instead of having one vote, like you damn near have 3 votes. because people are referring to you of like, is it a yes or is it a no? Or is it
Yeah.
this guy or is it this guy, you know?
Yeah. Well, you can also tell like copycats. I mean, we do all have people out
Tons of
there
them.
that are copycat, and you don't want the tribute artist, you know?
Yep.
You want the real deal. Like, you don't want the guy that's the cover band. So it's tough. I mean, we both know, and I hope you haven't had any, and I'm sure we're all going to have our own copycats, but I mean, there are people out there who are like, you've got the faux bots and then you got the mobots. It's like,
Right.
really? Like, did you guys really just change a letter? Like,
right.
that it's really uncool. And sometimes it'll be in the secondary show too. It's like, well, here's the secondary show, and I'm walking down the row, and it's like, oh my God, I just saw, well, here's this guy's knockoff, here's this woman's knockoff, here's this person. It's tough. So you have to know. I mean, it's like, do you sit there comparing like, oh my God, I got to get this right, because you don't want to let the knockoff or let them both in.
Well, that's when, I mean, it's pretty easy to determine when you're looking through the jury, but like, all right, number 206 and 607, and you can ask people like, is this the same artist? And they were like, no, it's not the same artist. And then you ask around the room like, yo, like, who's the real deal? And who's the copycat, or who's been on the scene longer, who hasn't been on the scene longer. And you kind of make your decision based on that. The funny part is that some guys do you better than you do you. And I'm like, I kind of favor the copycat a little bit. Like whatever like slight variation they're making, I'm like, I'm enjoying that more than this. So, you kind of have to be careful, and you have to manage, however you manage to choose who you choose. Just have a reason. Honestly, at the end of the day, just have a reason you're free to stand on for choosing who you chose to do. And I'll even backtrack a little bit in terms of finding your voice and figuring out the work that you're going to produce. I hate it when you go to a show, and this is what happened when I first started out. Like, landscapes were the deal, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you saw everybody selling landscapes, and you saw large photos of landscapes walking down the aisle, like people taking them home. And I'm over here selling portraits. Not just portraits, but I'm selling portraits of Black people. And I'm in an audience where there's not many Black people at the show. And I'm like, am I in the right spot? And it's like, nah, just stay true to your work, and you'll develop your following eventually. They may not be here right now, but you'll develop it at some point. But what I was going to say is, just because you see landscapes and boats and rainbows leaving the show, that does not mean you need to go chasing boats and rainbows. And then next time we see you, you have a booth full of boats and rainbows. You know what I mean? Like, don't chase what you think is popular or selling. Like, stick to what's here, and eventually it'll come around, and it'll serve you better because it's authentic, not because you were chasing the dollar.
It's about the integrity.
Sure.
That's what I talked to Ty about a little bit. It's like, well, Ty says whatever the hell he wants. Right. You walk past his booth, and it's like, if that appeals to you, you're going to walk in. But he's not ever going to be like, well, I saw this, people really liked those covered bridge scenes. So you're not going to see a covered bridge scene out of Ty and Ballpoint Pen. So it is. And people are attracted to that integrity, and they're attracted to, even if you're if you show in you went to school in Iowa, but if you show in Des Moines, your work, does that translate, or do you have to target like where you go, where you show people? It's like, you may only see like 10 brown or Black people in Des Moines when you go show next time, or you're like, okay, well, let me just go focus where I show my work.
I'm not selling the work exclusively to Black folks, photographs of Black folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
I mean, that's what I wondered. It doesn't have to be a diverse crowd.
No, not at all. Not at all. There's a whole separate issue of why we don't see the audience or like the showgoers, why we don't see much diversity in the showgoers. that's a whole nother issue there. Like personally, I didn't grow up going to art festivals. People like friends, and we didn't grow up going to art festivals. We didn't grow up with the idea of investing in art or collecting art or anything like that. Like it wasn't on our radar necessarily. I don't necessarily market to specifically to different cities. I may include a piece or two that might speak to that place, but there's an authentic reason why I picked to shoot there in the first place, not to, if I'm going to St. Louis, I got to bring some St. Louis stuff. Like I'm not the St. Louis guy, you know what I mean? Right. I'm not bringing the St. Louis body.
Yeah, I did that early on in my career and just about killed myself trying to do like, oh my God, what if I do this? What if I do that? And it's like, okay, let me focus, take a breath, just do my work. But I did do that early on, and you'll kill yourself trying to do that.
Yeah, because you're chasing.
Yeah.
You're chasing something at that point.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not authentic. Yeah. And I've told a couple artists too, young kids, like, what's a piece of advice that I could tell them about when they're producing their work? I'm like, produce what you feel. I've had pieces that I've shown for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Same show, same booth, see the same people. 3 years it's in the booth, doesn't sell. I think it's a strong piece.
Yeah.
The third year, people come by and they're like, oh my God, when did you do this? Like, this is amazing. And I'm like, it was in the booth the last several years, you know what I mean? But the cool part is you as an artist, you might just be ahead of the curve, right? Like your thoughts or your ideas might just be ahead of the curve. And then something happens in the world that makes the work that you produced a little more relevant.
That makes sense.
For them at the time, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Or there's an energy. Yeah. I've had pieces in my booth that there's something happens and there's an energy. Somebody comes in and you're like, they're like, oh man, I really love that. I really should buy it. And then, it happens all the damn time, but it's like,
for sure.
I should get it. And then they leave. Very next piece that's sold, and you've had it for like 3-4 years, and you're like, you believe in it. And then also I believe too, like sometimes you need that weird one in your booth to attract people in there to get them to get the other one, or the one that's a little bit more conceptual in order to get them. You're like, and they don't think they have the courage to buy that or to hang it in their house. But then, okay, well, let me get the safe one. And then 2 or 3 years later, they can get the one that really spoke to them
want.
If it's still there. And that's how you get collectors too, because you keep saying different things. Sure. You keep coming up with, I can't wait to see what you've done with a year off, so to speak, or the time to create.
True.
Has this been it's been a little stagnant for me. I've been a little bit. It's been hard, but have you been able to be creative this past year?
Creative in my thoughts and things that I want to do and ready to do. Yes. In execution, not so much. At least not to the level that I want to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I personally don't work well when I am either in stress or agitated or under some sort of like trauma or whatever, right?
Okay, yeah.
Usually I do my best work when I'm in my bubble. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm in a bubble. I have my thoughts and ideas. I'm insulated from what everybody else is talking about, and I'm just creating. I'm in my cubby hole and I'm doing my work. I'm in my laboratory doing my work. Yeah. And then the rest of the world is still moving, but it's not affecting me because I'm decided on this and I'm working on this.
Right. Well, you and I were both living during this past year in kind of like hotspots of Black Lives Matter and culture in Richmond, where I grew up and was still living until, I guess, May. We have had this Monument Avenue and Richmond, Virginia, capital of Confederacy, and all of these monuments of the Confederate monuments. And Kehinde Wiley has a huge presence in Richmond. Okay. One of his first big paintings was sold to the Virginia Museum or bought by the Lewis family and put into the Virginia Museum. They supported him early on. he came for a big show in Richmond and was blown away by the beauty of the statues on Monument Avenue, but the meaning of it, and being in the old capital of the Confederacy and seeing that. So when Black Lives Matter blew up last summer, there were protests up and down this rich suburb of Richmond, pulling down the Columbus statue, trying to pull down some of the other sculptures.
Yep.
The mayor and the governor got together and they took them all out. And it was powerful for me to go back and to walk down the avenue and be like, here's where I grew up, and my white privilege living 5 blocks away, just thinking, oh, look at the pretty sculptures. You know,
Right.
I didn't have to confront the meeting, but to go to see the meeting. And then you can walk right up Monument Avenue and see everything that people have done, and then end up at the Virginia Museum. You take a hard left, and to see that sculpture that was inspired by those, but then to take the Black voice and to put it on that sculpture of pride, and to see it so pristine when everything else there's been all this violence.
Right.
But it was powerful for me. I don't feel like it's my right to make any art about it. Chicago was a hotbed too. Like, it blew up.
For sure.
Yeah. I mean, did you make any art about that, or is it kind of just percolating?
So I went to a couple protests, couple demonstrations, and photographed while I was out there. The way I create my work, I used to, like once upon a time ago, was have an idea and then go out there and produce the piece so that it says what I wanted to say. And then later, as I started traveling abroad, I became a little bit more Johnny on the spot, where I immersed myself into a culture event situation and then photograph things as they happen. So obviously protests going on, I'm not creating anything. I'm more in the documenting.
Yeah.
Documenting.
I mean, at that point, does it kind of become more about like photojournalism kind of work?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a different approach to capturing that. And then you have an idea, if you see some repetitive things happening, positioning yourself in the right spot to capture what you think might be a great shot. It's a little different. But yeah, so photographed a few protests, and on the artistic side, like what I intellectually want to say and how I want to comment on everything and where we are right now. Man, I have an idea book, notebook that I've been like sketching and writing and journaling and everything like in there. And now I'm starting to dissect some of those thoughts. And I'm like, all right, which ones can I turn into like some dope pieces that have some significance? What means what? So it's a lot of figuring out how I want to comment more so than it is actually producing the pieces right now. The tough part is that listening to media while you're trying to create, it's like either more information or more motivation or more almost a pressure, but like, oh, you have to comment on this now. Right. And you have to comment on this. Yeah. And you have to make reference to that. It's a little distracting, which is why I say most times I feel a little bit more comfortable working while I'm in my bubble.
Yeah.
So I can actually finish pieces, complete pieces, and say what I want to say without feeling like, all right, well, it's not saying enough because now I need to comment on this and now I need to reference that.
And it makes me wonder if people are, I just ask you about it, but it makes me wonder once we are able to get back to work, that might be pretty exhausting for you to constantly have to answer to it,
Yeah, true.
I just kind of wonder, I mean, is that going to be the thing? We're like, well, where are your Black Lives Matter pictures? Yeah. I mean, is it going to?
No, that's always a question. A lot of times that's the question.
Yeah.
Or even simply, you're from Chicago. Where's your Chicago stuff? And it's like,
right.
It's less about Chicago.
Yeah.
and more to do with the story. Which ones did I shoot in Chicago? Yeah, I shot all of these in Chicago, but Chicago really doesn't matter necessarily. Like it's not the centerpiece of the story or that piece.
But I'm Richmond, Virginia on my sign, and I've had somebody come to me like, well, I love Civil War art. I'm like, well, I don't, and I've never done anything about that. Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, why did you just say that? It's just like, it's a rote thing. It's like they see something and then they have to say it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, very true. Very, very true.
Yeah.
So you can't control what people.
You can't, and you have to be bulletproof when you're standing there and just kind of take it.
You do,
yeah.
You do, and have your answers. You know,
yep.
Have your prepared statements of how you're going to interact with people, especially if you've noticed the trend that you're starting to hear it often. It's kind of like, all right, well, you might want to be prepared with how to respond.
Yeah, absolutely.
You
I've
know?
gotten myself in trouble and been offended at something that somebody says, and then I say something shitty back to them, and then all of a sudden you're taken off your game, and how are you going to sell anything in the next, until you get your mind right?
True.
I mean, it's all about sales, and it's all about, like, in our industry, I feel like you can't be like, I can't sell anything unless I'm likable, and I'm trying to just be myself and be open. And it's like, and if somebody takes you off of that, then you just kind of shut down and,
True.
sit in your chair. And I never, I'm going to get into it with Daryl Thetford, but talking about sales and stuff, but I never see you sitting. I walk by your booth. You're not sitting in your chair.
You know what? I am sometimes, though. I've had people get on me about that, and it honestly depends on the show. It depends on, like, the energy of the show and what's going on. But I've definitely been caught, like, in my chair,
slumped over,
like
looking at your phone,
slumped over, like bad, just kind of like bad energy.
Yeah,
where I've had to. Where there's definitely a power in giving yourself a pep talk before you do a festival and, like, having a game plan and things like that. So I'll sit behind the booth sometimes, like, all right, I need a great show. I need to do X amount of money. So I give myself a dollar goal.
Yep.
And I'm like, cool. Like, you need to give good energy. You need to say hello to everybody. You need to shake everybody's hand. You need to make sure that before they leave, ask them to sign your guest book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you need to engage, and be happy and pleasant so that they creating.
Yeah, they want a piece of that. Like, if I'm hanging wings on my wall, I don't just want wings on my wall. I want I want the dude I met on the corner. I want that interaction that we had. It's a special kind of thing. And I always try to say, like, open. I'll stand in my booth with the front closed, and I'll be doing I'll be open. And I'm like, okay, be open to people. My wife taught me that. She's like, you can't just, sit there like that and close it off. You
can't do it.
No, you can't do it. And you can't. And that's why you can't do that many shows in a row, too, because a lot of times by the end of that run, you're just like, oh, don't say it. And they say, somebody's coming, you're like, I already know what you're going to say. Don't say it. But you got to just be like, somebody, and maybe it was me. I don't know if I came up with this or not. And if somebody else told me this, but you're the prettiest girl at the bar. And somebody says something dumb to you, you just be like, they're just hitting on me. They're fine. They're trying to make that connection. Yeah. They're not trying to be an asshole. They're just trying to be like, hey, come around here often. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, I know I'm all that. So you just have to open yourself up to it and be like, yeah, I come here all the time. It's just be cool.
It's funny. It's funny as I do this, I'll back up a little bit. Let's say it's a slow show, right? And somebody's sitting up there talking to you. They just run up to you and talk about, now they're talking to me about the Cubs or the White Sox or something.
Right.
And I like baseball, but I'm not following it.
That's not why you came. Yeah.
That's not why I'm here, actually. But I'll sit there and I'm talking to them and I'm like, yeah, so I watched the game last night and it was, it was pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, when he hit that home run in the 9th inning, it was pretty dope. You know what I mean? So I'm up here, like, doing all these, like, hand gestures while I'm talking to this guy about, the same hand gestures I would do about selling a piece. We're just talking about baseball. They'll assume that, we're talking about the work and, I'm selling them and blah, 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 hands laughing, stuff like that. I'm basically performing.
Yeah, you are performing. And I'll use, somebody comes in, like a teenage kid comes in and they're like, they engage with you about the work and like, oh man, that's really cool. And it's like, well, there's no benefit from being an asshole to a kid and discouraging them in the arts. That's my number one. And number two, why not engage with them? The shy couple over there that doesn't have the courage to ask you about it, talk to the kid, and just use her or him as the person that engages them. And it's like, and then you get other people that are listening, and then it's like, it's a win-win. You've encouraged a kid in the arts, and then the shy couple is like, oh man, this guy was really nice. And, and I do reproduction sometimes, and I'll use those too, as just being like, this little kid will be like, oh my God, like, just take it. Didn't cost me much.
Right.
Here.
You got to play the room.
Right. And you got to play the room, and it, like we were talking before, it's all about authenticity too. It's like trying to have that connection with people. So, like,
I'm in the booth. I'm here to share my story.
Right.
If nobody's asking me anything, like, they're not necessarily going to hear the story. So, you take those opportunities to engage and speak a little louder so everybody else can hear it too.
You do, man.
Yeah.
Hey, how's your place? Is it all set up for the baby?
No, absolutely not. We're house hunting right now.
Are you really?
Yeah. So, baby stuff is everywhere. I got half of it sitting here in the studio. Other half is sitting in the apartment.
Well, I've got a little something for you. I'll save it until you have a place, because I asked you about your address, and I'm like, you didn't respond immediately. I'm like, maybe you don't want it yet. Like, like, what do I need with another package?
Right. Yeah, they're just kind of getting stacked at the moment.
So where are you guys looking?
It'll definitely still be in Chicago.
Good.
South side of Chicago. So we're figuring it out from there, because the housing market is bananas right now.
Everywhere.
Folks are out here paying like 20% over asking in some areas.
Insane.
So that kind of takes us out of contention for a few things too.
Yeah.
And even as artists and business owners too, and sole proprietors and things like that, doing what you're supposed to do for your business is one thing, like how you present your money and your financials.
Tell me about it. We just bought last year.
But when you want to purchase something, get a loan, they need your financial situation to look a particular way, right? And it's like, well, I wasn't ready for this 2 years ago.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, here we are now. And
that's
the money
really hard.
The money's there, but it doesn't look the way you need it to look.
Right.
In order to get the financing and things like that. So luckily I got this place through the SBA, and that was a little
cool.
Smoother of a situation, because it was, it's all business related. It's not business versus personal and looking at the whole enchilada.
Yeah. No,
so it worked out for me. They helped me out quite a bit.
That is a financial colonoscopy. It's a hard process.
It's rough. They don't teach you about these things. A lot of artists are kind of, purely just artists and find their way to the art business and try to navigate through it, and not necessarily knowing what they're doing. Like, you're learning on the fly as you go year upon year. So
right. Well, cool. Hey, you were talking about doing a podcast. You got any more ideas on that? I think that would be really entertaining to listen to.
I've definitely wanted to do a podcast. A couple of things. One is art, something art selling related, not necessarily selling it like that I know it all, but I will tell my story and my experience, versus, the successes and things like that, and things that worked out for me, interview other guys that I've learned from, along the way.
Right. So I'd love to hear that.
We'll figure something out there. This is cool. This is super cool. I'm like, babe, I'm doing a podcast today. Cool.
This has been just a really cool talk. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything we didn't get to before we go?
Nah, I appreciate that, man. Thanks for asking me to do this. Super cool.
Hey, thanks again. We'll see you in Chicago.
Sounds good, bro.
All right. Thanks again.
All right, man. Peace.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, find us on social media and engage in these conversations.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.
Oh, and if you like the show, we'd love it if you would give us your 5-star rating and offer up your most creative review on your podcast streaming service. See you next time.